Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today our guest is Michael Reilman. Thanks for being on the show, Michael.
Thank you, Whitney.
Now, Michael is a newbie syndicator that started his career as a mechanical engineer. His passion is in entrepreneurship and becoming independent from the W-2. His GP of 7 units, LP of 76 units, achieved 15% average annual return on self-managed stock market portfolio for 7 years, and has worked on projects exceeding $3 million in budget with timelines over 2 years. So, Michael, give myself and the listeners a little more about just who you are, where you're at in the syndication journey, and let's jump in.
Well, just to kind of start off, my real estate journey actually started in college, where I was living at some college area, and I was living with 5 other guys. And, we were paying, I think, $1,200 a month there. And I was like, dude, we need to do this more often. Like, I need to do this. I need to get involved with this because basically it's kind of free money and we're also not really destroying the place. So this is easy. And of course, my, uncle, who's a real estate agent, said, you don't want to do that. That's horrible. So he talked me out of it. Right. But anyway, going further on, I got into mechanical engineering. And I really like mechanics and things of that nature. So I actually really enjoy my job. It's not like a horrible thing, but anyway, it's really interesting because I started working at a international automotive company. And I love telling this story because it kind of tells you how kind of unfair the W-2 life is, working for someone. And it really got my entrepreneurial juices going. So when I worked at a large international automotive maker, one of the first projects they gave me right out of college was, hey, we have this process, it's very inefficient, just go see if you can improve it somehow. So long story short, not getting into all the details and technical stuff, with a simple $5,000 investment, the company as a whole actually got an $800,000 return annually, right? So would you take that deal, right, if I gave that to you?
I think so.
So, this was the biggest success within the first 6 months of me working there. It was the biggest success of a project I ever had in my career. And I won an award for it. They flew me out to England to, give a speech to other CEOs and stuff like that. And it was amazing, right? So awesome. End of the year comes around. They said, hey, Mike, great job on that work. Here's a little, extra incentive, here's a little bonus. And guess how much I got for that? I got $3,000. What sucks about that is that I got taxed on that and I actually got $2,000.
Oh, no.
That's what kind of got me started in all of this, to say, like, I don't know if this is right for me. So I kept doing engineering. I started looking at other options. And, I got into some other entrepreneurial things, such as like t-shirt company, didn't work out, certain websites or whatever. But I kind of got settled on real estate just because I truly think that it's the highest level of return for the lowest amount of risk. But at the same time, you have to really know what you're doing. You have to be really well educated in it because there's a lot to it. It's funny because, back what I said in the bio, it was, I was very into stock markets. I was very into retirement. At one point, I was a financial advisor for people, financial representative, I should say. I never got the certification, but it's like, I thought stocks were the way to go, man. And I was sitting there like 3% dividend, that's awesome. But as I started getting into that, I started doing the math and I'm like, well, to reach my goal to retire early, that's a lot of saving. That's a lot of working, and that's a lot of returns. And so even though I was doing fairly well, 15% in the stock market, it just wasn't, benefiting me now, right? It wasn't happening now. It was something I was a slave, I guess you could say, to the stock market. So got into, real estate, started looking and started investigating all different kinds of things. And I finally settled on multifamily for 2 reasons. One, because, you don't actually have to have your own money to do it. And 2, you can have property management handle it. So those are the 2 biggest things I ran into. But as I started getting into it, it got a little tough because, you're thinking about wholesaling, all these different things. But really, the syndication model seems the most achievable to me. And really what it boils down to is finding a deal and finding the capital for it. And with that said, those are the two biggest challenges that you can have. Because once you get into it, you start reading these books and, it sounds real simple. Oh, there's a step-by-step guide. But guess what? There's like 250 steps. And to be very honest, I've been sort of at this for 2 years, right? And it takes a lot really to get into that realm, because the education is a big part. Actually building the team and getting the right people on your team is a long time. And finally, on top of all that, finding systems to, one, gather investors, but also keep up with them. That's a big challenge too, of how to stay organized with all this stuff.
Nice. Okay. Well, let's get into a little bit of that. I think it's interesting that, like, you had thought about real estate many years ago, but then your uncle talked you out of it. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah. And I just think that's, it's important that you think about who you're getting advice from. And I don't know your uncle from anybody, so no offense, whatsoever. But
sure.
It's so true. I've experienced it in my life, and if I'm speaking to other people who have never been an entrepreneur, or they feel security in that W-2 position, like, that's not ultimately. They're probably very smart, good. They may be great investors, all those things, but they're ultimately not, where I want to be. And so it sounds like potentially that's what was happening here. And so you have to think about where you're receiving counsel from, right? Is this somebody that's way ahead of me, or are they doing what I want to be doing? And so, and that's going to help in that mindset too, just helping you to think through those things. But would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And that's one of the biggest challenges to overcome, is the mindset aspect of it. It's really one of these things where I thought I had the right mindset last year, but I absolutely didn't. I think it's something that kind of clicks in your head, where when you have the proper mindset, now I feel like I can take down 100 deal, no problem. I got the team in place, and I just really don't have the capital, right? And I need to just build and really network as best I can. Whereas a year ago, it's like, well, I might have this figured out. I'm kind of just like figuring it out as I go. And mindset is huge, because you have to believe you can do it, or else nobody else will believe you can. If you're sketchy, if you're like, I'm not really sure about that, it's very hard to convince people that you can deliver on, some of these things.
They can hear it in your voice.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And you're more likely to quit, right? If you don't believe you can do it. But, tell me, how did you overcome that? What was that thing this past year that helped you to really get your mind, where it needs to be?
So it's a couple things. Well, and earlier on, I did have a mentor, right? I had someone who was much more experienced than me, kind of educated and showed me the ropes, and was giving me advice on different steps so on that 6 unit that we talked about earlier, I had help closing through that, right? So I had someone guiding me along the way. And that's one big aspect. And I've seen it said a lot of places, but I would say mentorship in one way or another, any way you can, is awesome, because I think about this. I think about different things of this sort, where people who are doing these big syndication deals, they have families, they have kids, they have all these things going on in life, and somehow they have time for all this, right? And looking at this, it's like, well, if they can do it, I obviously can do it, because I feel like I'm a pretty intelligent person. I'm pretty organized. So, somehow I'm missing something. And breaking out that complicated thing into small little pieces is kind of one of the one of the key things. And when you do project management, when you do a big, let's say, value add, right? You have all these things you got to do. You got 100 units you got to turn. How do you coordinate that with your general contractor? You have to say, okay, this first week we're going to work on units 1 and 2. You sort of break it down in little bite-sized pieces. So when you say, all right, I got to find all these investors, it all starts with reaching out to one person, right? So one way that I have kind of reinvented myself, sounds kind of extreme, but just looked at things differently, was I have set myself daily goals. So I look at, I want to do something very, very simple every day. So one of my goals is call a broker. Doesn't matter what it's for. It could be, hey, what deals you got? It could be, hey, how you doing? It could be personal, whatever. Just build a relationship, build that discussion with them, Maybe they'll throw you something, maybe they won't, but it's a time thing. It takes a while for people to trust you and believe you can do what, you can close on this. And it also is something where you have to, So then the second thing, another big goal I have is contact an investor, one investor a day. So
nice.
What happens
like
is
through email or phone call, or how would you do that?
Anyway, because you have people all on your network, you have all these different people. So it might be more appropriate to text someone other than email. You might not have their email. It might be better to call them. It depends on what your relationship is with them and whatever seems natural, especially if you're going to be like, I need a lot of money from you, or I'm like at least trying to do that, right?
Right.
So obviously there's a lot of books out there that kind of suggest how you want to approach that, but it really should be more of the lines of like, hey, I'm working on this really cool thing. I'm working on my own business. Let me throw some ideas out at you and we'll talk about it, right? And there's a lot of roundabout ways where you can get them to buy in, and those are in some books. And especially getting referrals is big. But
I love that. I mean, like daily goals and really finding things that don't seem like just like you're having to jump over this extreme mountain every day, right? Like
exactly
finding small things you can knock out. I think that's great advice. No doubt. Go ahead.
And this is exactly what happens with this. So this is exactly what I found is that you call a broker, right? This is my goal for the day. I call a broker, doesn't pick up, leave a voicemail. Cool. I'm done in 30 seconds. But what you realize is like, well, I can spend 5 minutes doing this, right? So then you call 2 brokers or you call 3 brokers, and then they start calling you back, and then they start sending you emails, and then you start realizing you have all this stuff you got to do. Like my day, so I'm still working my job, right? So my day is I get up at 5 a.m. I sort of plan out my day of who I'm going to call, how I'm going to work this. That's another big part of the success is planning your day out. I've heard a lot of people do like weekly planning. So on Sunday, they plan their week, and that might work for some people. But for me, it's like I focus on what I'm going to do today in my, entrepreneurial life and also in my personal life. So, and what happens is like you'll get into days where it's like you wake up, you spend your 10 minutes reading a book. Another goal that I want to do is read for 10 minutes because I hate reading, but there's a ton of good information out there. And then it's like on the way home, when I drive home for lunch, it's like I'm on the phone calling this guy. And what you'll find is, what I'm getting to is, you'll realize you got to analyze 2 deals tonight, but you also got to call that broker back. But then you also got to schedule 2 lunch meetings with 2 investors. And it becomes this avalanche of activity, but you're building your networking base, you're getting your deal flow up. And there's some other things you can do that.
And you're learning a lot.
And it starts building up where these goals, these daily goals actually become difficult to do, but you have created this avalanche of activity. That's all good activity, that it's where you want to be, right? So that's all it takes. All it takes is one good broker to feed you deals, to believe in you. And it takes, investors to, a few investors. It could be close friends. I mean, it could be really anyone.
One thing that has made me successful is something that most people don't think of. It's the way that I've branded myself online. If you want to brand yourself to raise more capital, then I suggest working with my friend Adam Adams. So go ahead, scroll down, and find the link in the show notes. So what's a way, like being newer into the syndication business, what's a way that you are, maybe give us the top way you're educating yourself right now? You mentioned that was like one of the things you have to be doing.
So with education, there's tons of good content out there. I mean, right now, one thing I do is another mini goal. I try to listen to a podcast a day, right? I listen to yours. There's a bunch of them out there, and just spend maybe an hour. I'm very beneficial in the sense that at work, I have the ability to listen to podcasts. So I can knock out up to maybe like 4 hours of podcasts a day, sometimes not that much, but podcasts are awesome because it's auto information, and you can Google whatever is over your head.
What about building your team? You mentioned getting started building your team was important. How give us an example of what you're working on there.
So what I would tell someone who's starting out, and I didn't do this very well initially, but I would change it, is when you go out and network, when you go to networking events, getting around same like-minded people and just talking about what you want to do. Well, first off, that's the first thing you want to do. Just tell everyone, I want to get into multifamily. I want to get into syndication. I want to do this. So you just set that expectation. And through that actually got me into a multifamily meetup where I go regularly now, but also referrals. So when you say, hey, I'm looking for a good real estate attorney that can do this, that, or the other, or I'm looking for a property manager. Ask as many people as you can. And I believe I got this tip from somewhere else, but what you'll hear is that you start hearing the same people in your area, same referrals, and you can end up calling them up, getting to know them, and getting them on your team. And that's essentially how I did it, in a very inefficient and long way. It took me a while to do it, but it's very good, because I do feel like I have a rock solid team, considering they work with some of the biggest players in my area also.
Yeah, referrals are very important. Yeah. And I love referrals. So, and then next you mentioned, systems and to be able to gather, contacts and investors and being able to keep up with them. What are some ways you've, created a system?
So it's really funny too, because when people hear systems, they think it's some complicated thing that you have to pay for. There's a ton of free things out there, but you can even use, especially when you're starting out, you can use Excel spreadsheets and just keep track and have a date and put a date in there saying follow up in 3 months, sorted by what's your next people you have got to follow up with. I'm using MailChimp right now. Very easy to give updates to people that you talk to. Very easy to categorize and tag them. So all you need is an email address. You obviously get permission to email and say, hey, I can update you with the stuff I'm doing. You tag them. You can tag them as general, qualified investor. Tag them as, potential lead, whatever you want to do. And you can create email campaigns to follow up with them. And also you have a list where you can search to say, oh, who are these people I need to follow up with, and kind of give them a little more attention to, be willing to give you a verbal commitment potentially. So, yeah.
So Michael, what's been the hardest part of this syndication journey for you up to this point?
I would honestly say it's just all the little things you have to do. And with that said, they're all real simple. In all reality, I feel like this is simpler to do than my current job right now. But I know that sounds crazy to some people, but really, I think it's just a series of steps, because all this is trainable. All of this is, you can read and learn about it. There's a lot of stuff that you only get through experiencing it. Like I learned a lot in that 6-unit deal, and that was just a little baby deal, right? But it's the volume of stuff you need to do and the commitment you have to make. We talked earlier about mindset. It's doing something every day, because the reason why took me 2 years to get to where I am now is because, in all honesty, I took 4 months off. I thought I was committed before, and I wasn't. And that's what I was saying earlier about how mindset, something clicks where you understand, like, one, I can do this, and two, this is what I got to do to achieve what I want to achieve. Because one investor's great, but you're going to need a ton. And the first 10 you might talk to might say no. It's a numbers game, and it's just consistent everyday activity that's actually pretty difficult the activity isn't difficult. It's just doing it and convincing yourself to doing it, and doing it, especially on the days that you don't want to do it. That's the hardest part. So, my advice would be break it down to simple steps like that, push through all those things. And it's a big mental game. That's my biggest struggle. Yeah.
Got to keep getting up at 5 a.m., right?
Yeah. That's the only, for some reason, very early in the morning is the only time I'm okay reading. Like, I just don't like reading. And
yep, that's my favorite time of day. It's about 5 a.m. And so, Michael, what's a way that you've recently improved your business that we could apply to ours?
Like I said earlier, it's planning in the morning. So I would wake up, I literally think about exactly what I'm going to do when I'm driving home for lunch, on the drive back to work, what I'm going to do, who am I going to call, what am I doing during my lunch hour, what am I doing after work. And we're talking things like, I'm going to come home, going to let the dog out, I'm going to work out, I'm going to analyze these 2 deals, and then I'm going to shoot these 3 emails to these 3 people for whatever reason. Planning out those days. And that sounds like a lot, but you can knock that stuff out pretty quick. But literally just taking it one day at a time and saying, how am I going to achieve these super simple things with these little pockets of time I have? I have 10 minutes here. I'll make a phone call. This is who I'm going to call. This is the exact person, the exact number I'm going to call. And by having that laser focus, it makes it easier to do.
How are you finding investors right now?
2 ways. One, really just networking as best I can, going to meetups, talking about what I'm trying to do, asking people if they're interested in something like that, and things of that nature. But also, I've really started to use my Facebook as sort of the term thought leadership platform comes out, where it's both, hey, apartment investing is cool and this is why, and also just generally sound financial advice. So not only do I seem as, including personal stuff, not only do I seem like a guy who's trying to do big things here, but also, hey, here's some useful information, in case that's not really relevant to you, if you don't feel like you fit that mold.
What's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Really, I would say being a robot. So what I'd say by that is, it's funny because my mentor says, if you are not excited about a deal, if you're not incredibly excited about a deal, run away. You shouldn't be doing it, because you should be so hyped about a deal that, that's the only deal you should ever do, right? But that kind of contradicts with, I am emotionally scared sometimes of calling a broker. Like they might not believe me. I might embarrass myself, but just doing it, right? That's the hardest part. So being able to turn on that emotion and turn off that emotion, it's very major, because some things you have to just do it and do it consistently and not care what other people think. Obviously have that background and that knowledge to do so. And some things you have to really think like, are you excited about it? Are you ready for it? And and trust the numbers too. Don't get too excited about it. Don't let it drive you insane.
So, and then tell us how you like to give back.
Right now, the biggest thing is I try to stay active on Bigger Pockets. I try to just provide stuff that I've learned and try to break things down into simple examples and metaphors. If things are complicated for people, and try to give some value there. But also, same thing with the Facebook. Just provide that message of why this is a great alternative investment, and why it's, I think it's the best thing, the best thing for everybody, really. I think everyone wins. I think it's so much better than the stock market. And believe me, I used to be a big stock market believer, but also, again, that just general financial advice and positivity. There's also some posts I have planned that are just being positive mindset, being just a positive person, not being negative and letting, those things bring you down.
Michael, I really appreciate your time. And I think that the listeners and myself can relate to you and how, it's not easy getting started in this business or in any business, but just you elaborating on like having that morning routine, having that structure, having those goals, and even, how you talked about, okay, let's find a goal that we can achieve every day and let's start there. I just think that's so important. And I hope the listeners are listening to you when you're talking about that, because that was crucial for me as well, getting started and really growing a brand and a business. And so I think you hit the nail on the head and just some very important points there. And it's going to be interesting to see where you're at, a year from now, just keeping up doing what you're doing. But tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you as well.
The two easiest ways is you can send me an email at summitpathacquisitions@gmail.com, or you can check my website out at summitpathacquisitions.com.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.